Let me call to order a regular scheduled meeting of the Woodland Park Planning Commission. It's Thursday, June 25th at 6:30 p.m. We have a roll call.
Sure. Vice Chair Ken Kennedy is absent. Joe Fury,
Here.
Ken Hartsfield,
Here.
Don Hoyne,
Here.
Jared Newcomb,
Here.
and Chair Lee Brown.
Here.
Also in attendance is myself, Karen Schmink, the Planning Director, and then assisting us with AV this evening is our Code Compliance Specialist, Rick Dieter. Thank you.
Thank you. Pledge of allegiance, please.
Pledge allegiance to the United States of America, and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
With that, I think we'll turn it over to Planning Director.
Sure. Tonight's a work session, and I had listed two specific topics. The first is more to kind of provide just a brief overview of what I labeled a legislative item. The city attorney did not correct me for a hearing at your July 9th meeting. In Woodland Park, there is a piece of land owned by the city of Woodland Park, and it is completely surrounded by municipal boundaries. And for whatever reason, that little piece of city-owned property was never annexed into city limits. So it's actually a county island completely surrounded by the city. Under Colorado state law, annexation and the process that is followed is highly scripted in the state laws. Ken's smiling, so you must have encountered this somewhere.
A few times, yeah.
Yeah, it's very specific as to what needs to happen when somebody submits a petition for annexation, yada, yada, yada. This is a little unique since it is a municipally owned enclave. There is a special carve out associated with those. So those go to the front of the line. They don't have to go through all the hoops. And council can actually affect an annexation through just a regular ordinance process.
As long as we have the zone within 90
But
days.
when you have newly annexed property, you need to come up with some type of zoning designation for the property. So that's what's coming in front of you guys, is to make a recommendation on how that property should be zoned. And at a staff level, we're bringing you what we think is a recommendation for that. So that would, especially since it's municipally owned, it's got a water tank on it. That's its function in life is to support the water utility. So we're bringing forward the public semi-public land designation for that municipally owned property. And and then also identified like how we're classifying that use, based on the definitions that we have in the UDC. So that'll be in that application. We've gone ahead and done the notice related to the zoning recommendation that you guys will be, hearing and making. So it should be fairly straightforward. I've not gotten any pushback, feedback, concerns. I think a lot of folks didn't even realize it wasn't in the city. So it's kind of a cleanup item that we're
Where is it?
It's the Gold Hill Tank site, so it is at the end of West Midland Avenue.
The west end of town behind us.
Yeah. So, yeah, northeast of the ministry's properties, northeast of the ministry's properties. On the north side of
Odd looking
Stratford.
triangular-ish.
Yeah, it's a really bad triangle.
Okay. So off of Spruce Lane, sort of.
Yeah. So and this came about partly because the utilities director was trying to get permits in place to install a new water tank, and he was very frustrated with his experience with the county planning office. To get permits in place to put the tank in, so.
It's easier to have your permits issued by yourself.
Kind of, yeah. And the property's been owned by the city since the 80s. It's been surrounded for a very long time. Probably a good 20 years it's been surrounded by, city boundaries. So why this was never picked off previously, I don't know. And then I'm sorry, the reason I was making a face is I'm a little concerned about what's over Joe's head now that I look at the ceiling tile. You may want to scooch over a seat. I don't know how wet that is, how fresh that is. The ceiling
It's
tiles,
clear,
really-
but
it looks pretty bowed.
What?
Bowed.
Yeah.
it's behind
Where
him.
the water, yeah, it is behind me.
Okay, just FYI.
Okay.
You came in one piece, I want to send you home in one piece.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
So,
Not like
okay,
that.
so anyhow, that's that item. Like I said, it's a little bit different. We've not done an annexation since I've been here. I don't know that the city's done an annexation in a very long time, partly because of water challenges and stuff, but this is not ripe for development. It's just ripe for the city's continued use as part of our infrastructure. So that'll be in front of you to finish making a formal recommendation. And then July 16th is when the annexation ordinance and the first reading of the zoning ordinance will be in front of city council. And they'll have their public hearings on those on the first meeting in August. I forget what date that is, the 5th? Yeah, okay, August 5th. So
Does
that's how
does
that'll.
the zoning matter have to come before the planning commission before it goes to city council?
I'm sorry, what?
Does a zoning matter have to come to planning commission before it goes to city council?
Yes, which is why it's on your July 9th schedule.
Okay, that's all right.
Yeah. Yeah, we've been noticed the hearing and stuff for that. So it is in front of you guys for recommendation that night. And that's actually your only hearing item on that meeting. So the other item to talk about, if there's no more questions on that, is you recall as part of our process of updating and developing the Unified Development Code, there was a number of things throughout that we identified as, oh, this could use more work. Oh, we should probably look at the metrics or standards behind this. So we were keeping a list of all of that. And so what I brought to you this evening and sent out via email late this afternoon was basically that list of stuff that we had identified through that process. And so looking for guidance from you guys, just in terms of your thoughts and for prioritizing some of this. And it is a recommendation that comes from you guys. But it's not like the definitive, this is the order we're going to do things in, because I've got guidance from city council and the city manager that sometimes trump what you guys say. But there is interest and concern in terms of what does the planning commission think, is needing more prompt attention versus other items. So that's the paper that's in front of you. And the first part of that is definitely updates to the UDC. On the second page, there's a couple more of those items, and then there's something I had identified over a year ago as wanting to update our engineering specifications, especially the policy chapter, the procedure and policy chapter. So I had actually asked for through the budget process for funds for that, to hire somebody to help with that. It did not get funded last year. I'm going to continue to make that particular request until at some point it does get addressed. Since that would be very helpful to have that really refreshed and cleaned up and streamlined, because there's things in there right now that we stumble and trip over, at a staff level in terms of working with the developers, finishing infrastructure, when things come under the city purview, after warranty periods and stuff, just it really needs to be cleaned up and streamlined. And then of course I've got a place on the paper for other suggestions you guys might have, things I might have missed on the list, or other things that, have been kind of in the back of your mind that you want to at least throw on the table for potential consideration at some point. So, I again apologize, I didn't get this out to you ahead of time. If you want to take a few minutes to just kind of rank them 1 through 5, 1 being a low priority, 5 being what you think is a high priority. And then we can kind of total some of that, or if you want to talk about each of them a little bit more so you understand what they are, we can do that too. I've lived with the list, so for me, it's kind of obvious, but it might not be for y'all.
Subject to other people's comments. As long as we don't protract the discussion, I think it'd be useful to at least walk through some of these to get a sense of it. So I put my one down because, oh, I forgot about something critical that somebody else will mention.
Okay,
And then, when we get to the end there, I've got one I'd like to add.
As do I.
perfect. That's why I wanted to have this chat with you guys. So under the UDC updates that we had identified, one was just our architectural design guidelines in general. That it's this planner's opinion, and that's all it is that I think, given how important aesthetics are to this community, that we would benefit from more robust standards around architectural design and even landscaping. That if those metrics were more stringent and detailed, people partly, the guy making the application would hate it, but the community as a whole would probably appreciate it. And potentially would, a number of things that are currently requiring conditional use permits might not need that anymore if people had more confidence in the standards around how something was being developed. But the other part of the architectural thing is the wildland urban interface development regulations and codes. So that's where they get into more specifics around building materials, and then how the property is cared for. So clear areas immediately, Ken may be able to explain this better than I. Clear areas more immediately adjacent to buildings, and where and how much vegetation you can have, which is supposed to help with reduction in wildfire risk.
Right, has the city done anything on that yet?
I'm waiting on the fire chief.
Okay, because I know we've had the discussion,
So,
other jurisdictions, so.
yep. Yep, I'm waiting.
It's not so much the appearance, the landscape has an issue. It's usually, it's non-combustible materials and screening openings so the embers can't get inside and some things like that. So the actual impact on fire resistive siding, so the vinyl may not be possible, which certainly supports the guideline, architectural guidelines. The hardy board and that kind of thing is more preferable and gets into roof materials, but most roofs are class A already right now that I've seen.
So, anyhow, that's what that one's about. The next one is landscaping standards, including water-wise limitations. I suspect that that would be helpful to potentially have better guidelines around what does that look like. Right now, it's pretty broad and subjective. So some more better metrics behind some of that. And then potentially much more specific around water-wise plants.
So more concerns about the water usage versus the appearance. Number of trees or
Well-
trees, things like that. I'm just trying to see what kind of limitations you're proposing.
Oh, I don't have anything yet. I'm just like, this is something I think needs to be looked at. And that's like a whole other process in
Yes.
terms of what does this potentially look like? That there's, I see it happening partly with like a visioning process, that where you've got like options, like which of these do you like, in terms of degrees of landscaping or just the appearance of things. So I see that as a different kind of public process to develop that. What was I gonna say about that? Oh, like one of the things that drives me a little nuts in town, and it's really more a maintenance issue after everything's done, is the amount of grass that's just growing out of the decorative rock. You can drive along 24 and there's just all kinds of grass growing out of decorative rock. And it's, why did we not just put, native grass in to start with if that's the look we're ending up with? Because it's not getting watered by anything other than Mother Nature, because it's rock. So, driveway design requirements. There are occasions where we've got folks that have quite a few vehicles and they like to treat their entire front yard as a driveway. So potentially limitations on width of driveway. Do we want to require a hard surface for the single family home? Because right now you can have a, a different surface like crushed rock. It does not need to be concrete or asphalt for a driveway. So is that something, is that a direction that we're potentially wanting to go? So that's that item.
Um,
Sure.
In our community, we have several houses that have. In our community, we have several houses that have narrow driveways. And with the width of the street, if somebody parks directly across the street from their driveway, they can't get in or out. Because
The
they
streets,
can't make the 90-degree turn.
interesting.
I'm just something to think about with that.
Well, and then sometimes people have toys, you know, whether it's an RV and or a boat and or jet skis and or snowmobiles, and you know, then you end up with the equipment yard down the side of the house or in the backyard. I did actually have somebody have concerns about that in their neighborhood. So that's kind of what that's about. Is this something that needs to, or what is the priority level for potentially looking at this? The next one's near and dear to Mr. Fury's heart. Lighting, possibly a dark sky type regulations. So that's where we're even more assertive around lighting on houses, that it be full cutoff, downward directional, colors.
Can we have full cutoff lighting?
We talk about it when somebody's, especially if they get a conditional use permit for doing that. But
It's for
potentially.
It's commercial only that I've seen it written.
That's where we've really been applying it. But then that potential to, we go back and want the entire community to go this direction so that we have the ability to see more stars and such at night. So that's, you know, a time period for folks to bring their exterior lighting on their house into compliance. I've got somebody out there that I've had Rick nagging endlessly that they changed out the light fixtures, they updated them, and it's not what we are looking for. So and they're out of town, and it's just hard to really get a hold of those folks. So, so that's that one. One of the things that I think needs more clarification potentially is that manufactured modular tiny home location zone districts. I think we've got it, you know, to like where it was in the prior code, Title 18. But I'm highly confident that that does not comply with state law these days. So that potentially needs to be revised and amended so that we're not in trouble there.
Kind of a general comment, but this certainly makes it come to mind. I often have wonders like if there's state laws and unless we absolutely object to them, I'm a little perplexed sometimes why we go to the trouble of creating all the details of having our own code on certain things when there's existing federal and state law that covers the subject.
There's still a good degree of local control. And then when you're the planner working on these things, it's much easier to be able to look at just your zoning or your development code as because this was very challenging in Oregon because you were really kind of having to do or administer your local codes, and then you were also practicing planning directly out of state law. And that was not easy to read or follow out there. That was actually mind numbing. You almost really needed an attorney to do anything. You know, even as at planning staff, you almost kind of needed that JD degree to navigate Oregon state law. So that's where the law might say this, but for ease of staff and helping the community, because you know somebody in the community that wants to look something up, they don't want to have to like hunt and identify what are the resources I need to look at to figure this out. So that's where our UDC is very helpful. And the state law kind of provides that framework for us.
Yeah, because sometimes we find we have to then amend ours to come into compliance with with newer updated state laws. And if we just didn't have a home rule law for that subject, it would just be automatic. We wouldn't have to go to that trouble.
Well, like Karen's used, the ease of use for the local people and the staff. It's good to have one book to look at rather than a bunch of cryptic looking up state statutes and trying to
I understand.
read through
Yeah.
that.
The other thing,
Too.
that appears to have changed over the last 20, 25 years is, and I've worked for statutory municipalities, so there it was very clear in terms of the states, like the bare minimum, this is what you're doing. But like with some of the recent laws that have come out, they've, like ADUs, I think is the one I'm thinking of. It was written in such a way that like, this is the bare minimum that you have to do. And then if you fall in these categories, you could also do this. Or if you're over this size, then you have to do this. Versus previously it was a more simple, direct way of writing law where like, this is the bare minimum and this is what you guys need to meet. So now they're being more creative when they're writing these laws. So. The mobile home park regs, if you recall, we did not do a very deep dive into that. We also don't have a lot of demand for anybody wanting to do a new mobile home park. But you recall, some of the language in there was quite antiquated, you know, with like health department reporting and a few other things. And so we didn't do very much with that. I think we took out like a couple of things that were just seemingly way outdated, but for the most part, that could use a cleanup and probably a lot of streamlining. There's a lot of stuff in there that really isn't necessary in today's world.
Well, maybe that might have been a better time for my earlier comment, because the city spent a lot of time on creating, updating, revising those rules that have never been applied
Or needed,
or needed,
or
right?
needed, you know.
So,
Yeah, you know, they might have adopted them and there was one mobile home park that came in and then nobody else bothered to show up wanting another one in the last 40 or 50 years. You know, because I think those regs have been around since the 60s. This one's really more administrative at our staff level. When you look at our zoning map, you'll notice that it really is primarily just the basic zone districts. It does not have attached to it or shown on it those other overlay zones, like we've got a couple different overlays related to signage. You know, so that doesn't show up on that zoning map. It was a couple separate pages in the UDC is where they're inserted. From a practicing planner standpoint, it's much more customary to see them like drawn in on the same zoning map or a little carve out at the bottom corner of a zoning map, a blow up of a specific area or something. But that would be my preference, is to kind of get those all rounded up on the zoning map and not buried in the code document. Parks, we had all kinds of parks. We have neighborhood parks, we got pocket parks, we've got linear parks, we've got, I can't even remember, it was just kind of like a crazy number of parks definitions. So I don't know that all of those are truly necessary. Probably need to be looked at and refined in coordination with PRAB. So that's what that project looks like. You know, is anybody going to come in and specifically request some odd little, I don't know what, I just, Dawn's flipping pages there, so.
yeah, no, I'm just looking for the definitions and
Yeah. Because there's probably at least a dozen different kinds of parks definitions.
there's quite a few. Community, mini neighborhood, school, special use, sports complex.
Yeah. The next item on the list is parking metrics updates. That was something that Logan Simpson had started to look at, and then we pulled them back out of that. Just because we were really wanting to focus more on restructuring, and then that diving into those metrics probably needs and deserves broader public attention to make sure that this is what's really going to work for us. That was one that we just weren't comfortable with just a stroke of the pen, that probably really should be looked at. Because we've got kind of two extremes in this community that we look at. Up here at Gold Hill South, where the city market is, that is like the world's worst, badly designed, crazy tight parking lot with probably not enough spaces. And then there's Walmart, where even the day before Thanksgiving, half that parking lot is empty. So talk about somebody who has entirely too many parking spaces. So somewhere there's a happy medium. And I'm not sure that our code currently gets us to the happy medium. So that's that item. Residential uses being allowed in commercial zone districts. And then also accessory dwelling units should have been a separate bullet. Sorry about that. So right now there's, many different commercial zone districts where somebody can locate a single family home or a duplex. It's this planner's opinion that undermines the intent of the commercial district.
Permitted uses.
Yeah, yeah. And I've made mention before that, and you were at that work session with city council where they decided they really want to do a sub area plan in and around the downtown and look more in depth at like the neighborhood commercial versus the UR zone interplay in that area. So from that particular planning process, I think we'll potentially end up looking at this or being directed to then look into that a little bit more. So I see that coming about from that direction.
Was that the discussion where we were talking about like transitional zone, like a new zone type in
Yeah.
between?
Well, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Or something. I haven't,
I'm sorry.
I couldn't connect that discussion to the name of it too. I think if we're gonna give some view on what we think is takes priorities or not, got to change the name of that.
Change the name of what?
One we were just talking about,
Residential uses in a commercial zone district?
right.
Mhm.
In fact, the issue was commercial uses in residential zone districts. If you recall, it was moving where the subject came up, it was moving it was a commercial use that was put into a urban residential district.
It was mainly the short-term rental issue.
Mhm.
It-
Right.
So this was actually, when I reading, I thought we needed to add an extra bullet for it, but if this is what it is, it's a transitional zoning between the residential and commercial districts.
I think they all interplay that need to be looked at collectively, but they're potentially like slightly different items. But I do think that they will get talked about at the same time.
Especially because the key mover on the city council at the time is now our mayor.
Mhm.
And I think this council generally, including the now mayor, thought that was something we should focus on.
Which is why the reason would be to look at a sub area plan, and do some data collection. What's going on? Where are the lines? Where do we have businesses versus residences, compared to the actual zoning district? Yeah, there's more. And then what do we want to see going forward? So that's.
In general, I mean, can be an issue with residential uses popping up in commercial. It's not what we're looking for our commercial districts, but over time, the trends tend to be more commercial moving into residential.
Well, right now we have a code that very clearly allows somebody to cite a residence in a commercial zone.
Yeah.
Like right over here on Henrietta Street, that duplex that's there, that's how that got there.
And then there's some like right behind Jimmy John's. Isn't that in that commercials?
I maybe, I'm not as familiar.
There's like 4 of them.
But yeah, right now our regulations clearly allow somebody to put a residence in some of our commercial zone districts.
That point is, that's very different. It's a different subject, and I'd add it as a separate subject than transitional zoning between urban and between commercial and residential. Different question, can you put single family houses on Main Street? Different question.
So. And then accessory dwelling units, like I said, that should have been on a separate bullet. My apologies for that. And where we landed with our current ADU regulations, they're not fully compliant with the state, but is what council wanted. And it's, like I said, I don't know that that's a very high priority, but at some point that may need to be revisited. So that's just why that's there. Sign standards, that's potentially a much bigger item, because those of you who were here for developing the current sign code know how challenging and painful that can be. Our biggest issue right now is, I think it was 2011, there was a Supreme Court case came out called Reed v. Gilbert, which provided very specific guidance and requirements around signage where you can regulate time, place, and manner, but not content. So if you want to put a sign in your front yard that says the king is a fink, the city cannot object to the message, but we can have standards in place that says, oh, it needs to be 20 feet back from your property line and it can't be bigger than 2 square feet. So that's the time, place, and manner. But the message, you're not supposed to control. So. Reed v. Gilbert, Mr. Attorney.
Can I comment?
Sure.
Oh, I think we should also consider a brightness aspect to signs.
I think
because-
we've got a standard in there now,
Okay.
for the electronic message boards, not necessarily for, ambient lighting, but the electronic message boards, there's standards in there.
There's not far from where I live, there's well, the Impact Church. They haven't used it lately, but for a few years they had a very bright lit sign, which have no problem with the sign and what it says, just the brightness of it. It was
For me,
like blindingly bright.
it's the Nazarene Church for a while had like a red and white, and I thought I was getting pulled over every time I passed it. I was like, oh my gosh, what's going on? So then I look back and it's the church sign. Okay.
Yeah, sometimes they don't understand what is really needed, and then I think signs are more sophisticated than they used to be in terms of that ability to adjust depending upon the volume of daylight, because you need more brightness because it blends, otherwise you lose the image on your sign during, high noon versus after dark. It's a different illumination level. In the Denver metro area, just before on I-25, just before the turnoff for I-76, there's this giant auto place there, the huge electronic message board. And at one point they had that turned up so bright where you really couldn't like focus on the road as you were going by. It was blinding, and you're on the interstate. And I went to a training where some representative from the sign industry was there, and I brought that up, and he knew exactly which sign it was immediately. And it's like, I got one word for whoever owns that thing. It's liability. For what point when somebody has an accident because they can't see due to that thing obstructing vision and traffic. Wasn't too long after that when they kind of settled it down. So. And then also related to signs is measurement provisions, because right now we draw a square or a rectangle around whatever the sign is, and that's how we measure it. I did have a sign professional request that we look at, if I've got a round sign, why can't I use, the mathematical equation for calculating the area of a circle? Why do I have to draw a square around it to come up with the sign measurement? So our code right now is very limiting, and so they're suggesting that we consider, better ways to be more accurate or to more accurately measure in a regular shape of a sign.
Sounds like a one.
Sounds like a what?
Sounds like a one, how you measure the area of the sign.
Unless you're the sign guy, but yes.
It was 5. It was his number 5.
Yeah.
So I'm just bringing up the topics, The special use permit section. if you recall previously, our use table never had any S's in it for special uses, but there was this whole other section that had uses listed. So that was one of the things where we went and tried to reconcile that. I think that potentially that needs to be revisited, and 'cause I didn't, at a staff level, I didn't feel like it got the vetting it needed to get that across the finish line. That some of those things may or may not still need to be a special use permit. Yeah, is it 100% accurate? I'm a little nervous about that. The next one is emergency service facility, to actually come up with that as a use and then add that to the use table. In that one, you're probably going to see sooner rather than later, partly because the fire department is interested in installing a training tower over at their facility. And under the old code, it was classified as, I think, essential services. But that by prior planners and stuff, but that definition, especially how it's worded today, you can't get there from here. And emergency services really is a designated category that's desirable. And that's where you have things like ambulance service substations or fire station substations, police stations, their substations. That's an emergency services use. So that's that item. The next one, I think at one point we did have in the table, but we had gotten some feedback from the community during the review process that had not been vetted by the community. So again, the objective was to get the code restructured. So we pulled that use, the power sports dealers, out of that use table, but potentially something we need to add back in. The next item for a potential use to be added to the use table is data centers. You're very likely going to see that way sooner rather than later, because right now, City Council did a first reading on an ordinance establishing a moratorium against siting or applying for a data center. So the public hearing on that is next week. So June 8th. No, wait a minute. No, I'm all confused. July 16th. Sorry, it's a couple weeks out. July 16th is when that public hearing will be held on setting a moratorium on that particular use coming in. Right now, if somebody was to walk in the door and ask about citing one, because that use is not specified in the use table, they would follow the section for uses not specified. So then they're potentially asking for, hey, can we put this in the zone district? And an analysis gets done at that point. So we've got kind of a stopgap in there at the moment, but this actually came forward from the city attorney for the moratorium anyhow, which I think is a good idea to make sure we've got appropriate breathing room so it gets vetted appropriately. Issues with data centers a lot of times are the potential volume of water that they require for their cooling purposes. And then sometimes there's noise associated with them, given all the equipment that hums and uses water, and giant HVAC systems. So that's that one. Outdoor storage metrics, flag that, since it seemed to be, that 2,000 square feet of outdoor storage seems to be pretty small, especially when you're talking about contractor storage. So just something that maybe needs to be revisited. It doesn't mean it changes, but it does potentially need to be revisited. The next one is developing regulations regarding using Connex containers for storage.
That are addressed in commercial districts already?
Nope. How we've been handling that is, when I did talk to the prior director and get kind of what she was doing with it, but since I've been here, they've been allowed, when somebody's doing a substantial commercial remodel project and they need the storage. You may recall when temporary basis as part of another permit associated with a construction project. So it's not a a long-term storage proposition where, you know, I buy 3 of these, I line them up next to my business and I'm good. Because I don't think they comply with our architectural standards. You know? So that's that particular item. So that's what's on that list. Don, you said you had an item to add?
Yeah. Something I've been interested for a while. I would like to come up with a working application definition, where you said of a detailed, verifiable, and authenticated documentation of the availability to connect to a water source that is sufficient and adequate to the service needs of the proposed lots, uses, and structures. A standard, I guess, is what I'm looking for.
Okay.
Because
Um,
that's it's important new part of the, you know, of the ordinance that was passed a little more than a year ago. But as the ones who have to review it, I don't know how to measure it. I don't know how to apply it. I don't know really who's responsible for it, because I don't even know if the applicant can really meet the intent of what this says.
okay. Okay.
All right, now, utilities just says yes or no.
That's the position I've been taking is the way it's written is it kind of does boil down to, you know, the Public Works and Utilities Director's comfort level of whatever they're bringing or talking about. And a lot of that really boils down to, as that person would say, you know, have we planned for that? There's a number of things that we've not planned for. That's potentially going to make some development very challenging and potentially not doable. So that'll be interesting at some point. But to get into like, what does that look like? I mean, I understand your frustration.
But when that
but
point comes, when we get to that point, we're inclined to say no based on that. No, based on what process, what standard, how, because they're gonna say, well, you're not, this is arbitrary, this is not applied
yeah.
uniformly, there is no defined metric, and they'd be largely right.
And that's potentially a larger item depending upon what the city needs to do around its own water planning and resources, that there may be other background documents and support that need to happen at a different level before we're able to have something here. Because right now it really does boil down to, have we planned for the water or not? And then if not, well, where is water coming from? And we haven't had that one yet. You know, since those regs went into place a little over a year ago. But that's potentially a challenging conversation. And right now I default to whatever the Public Works and Utilities Director says. It's like
Yeah.
the keeper of the water.
And you know, I'm have the same mindset, but if that plan were like presented maybe annually or semi-annually and blessed by us or the city council, then, you know, then it'd be laid flat. And if it's in the plan, great. If it's not, then it needs to be, you know, assessed according to the same process. But so it's a little bit, there's a process there more or less, but it's not real well codified.
It's definitely not, with tight boundaries on it. There was a work session that the Utilities Director did for Planning Commission before you were on the commission, Dawn. And I know we recorded it. I'll see if I can find that for you. Because in that, he talked more about how the residential tap management plan works and how commercial fits in relative to that.
Yeah, I think I've watched that.
So that hasn't changed. That's still how all that happens.
Yeah, but it's just a bit ad hoc.
That's what we got. So, and again, I
And
understand.
that's what I want to discuss, is getting it.
I understand where you guys want to
Clearly
go,
defined.
and there's ways to get there. But it's potentially going to require other tools in the background around really planning for water. So I don't know that it's something that just happens here with something in our zoning regs. There's a different kind of set of tools and resources that potentially need to be developed and put into place.
The other clarification, of how it's listed in the ordinance implies that the applicant needs to provide this.
Yep,
And I think that's beyond the scope of what the applicant can't assess the needs of the city.
but they can assess the needs of their proposal. That's what we're asking.
But that the water is sufficient, can't be done by them unless they have their own private well or their own private source. So
Yeah,
I'm all,
I wrote
get
it
the
down.
intent, the intent is clear, just how we go about applying the intent is less so.
Lee, did I capture yours earlier when you were talking about transitional zone district?
If you created a new one called urban or CBD residential transition,
Okay,
it sounds like you also split out ADUs as a separate one,
yeah,
and residential use in commercial zone districts is one too.
okay, yep. I got it.
So stated, and so being narrowed like that, it's pretty easy one to implement too.
Which one?
No single family houses on Main Street. It's pretty easy to write that down.
Well, and
That
I'd
seems
have to look
to
at-
be the concern you're expressing, residential uses. in
no,
Commercial districts.
well, it's,
Oh,
I don't think that happens in the CBD. It's in neighborhood commercial and community commercial zones. I can't remember on the CBD. I'd have to look it up.
isn't that the one that talks about dwellings on the second floor?
That's permitted in the central business district.
I think single family residence is conditional use in the CBD.
I don't recall.
We've gone through some.
I gotta look it up. I mean, but the point is it needs to be looked at.
Yep.
So, okay.
Yep.
Anybody else have additions, preferences? Yes, sir.
Would, let me just state a situation that we may or may not want to address. So I live in the reserve at Tamarack. And as you all know, many or a lot of the houses there border Highway 67. And as we all know, traffic is increasing. And gosh, I was standing on a neighbor's property and on a Saturday morning, and you almost had to yell just to carry on a conversation. But anyway, the point being, should we zone some kind of buffer zone for future development to not be right on a major highway? I think that's kind of a good practice kind of thing, but I'm just throwing that out there. There's a potential.
Right now, I think there's standards in the regs related to buffering in certain situations between commercial uses and residential uses. I don't know that we've got anything that specifically addresses the highway. And that's one of those where you gotta think the market would kind of handle that. And I question developers that want to develop housing at those kind of locations. It's like, really? Because to your point, Joey, that's not any place I would want to live.
Yeah.
So, I would not appreciate the noise. Other items to add to the list?
Karen, how did you propose to do this? You go, say, architectural design guidelines, 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 3, or whatever, or
Well,
you get a hand in and is this a ballot?
well, if you guys want, you can rank them all and I can run and put your initials on your page. So I can run copies and then get you your paper copy back. And then I can compile that. And then at our July 9th meeting, like I said, since we've only got like one hearing item, we can do another work session and kind of just go through what do those results look like? And that way, not terribly long and,
So you're looking at us to name those 5 on our sheets, give them.
well, no, you can rank each one 1 to 5. So each one gets how many,
Oh, okay.
yeah, so you don't have to pick 5, you get to,
Oh, each
I'll-
one gets a number.
yeah.
Rather
So we have multiple,
It's not ranked.
rather than my top 5
You
list.
can have 3 5s and 4 4s.
I'm misunderstanding. Okay.
yeah, no, yeah, so when we get done, we may have, like 6 number 5s, and it's like, ooh, well, we might need to further refine that.
Interesting, it's just. I don't know how long I've had this map, probably about a year. Clearly shows that overlap.
Oh, yes.
I don't know how that got missed.
Yeah, I don't know either. Up at the Haven, yeah.
Do you want to rank the other update item?
You can add them at the bottom. And then rank those as well.
No, I meant your pre-printed other update.
Engineer.
You can certainly rank that if you'd like, yeah.
Like people need a couple more minutes
That's 5.
or not.
But otherwise, that's all I had for the work session. I don't have anything else to report since I kind of did it as we were going along. That we can kind of adjourn the more formal part of things, and you guys can just finish your little worksheet, and we can take care of getting you your copy back. So you get it to take home with you, and I got what I need to then work on compiling things.
Okay. Burning issues that we need to cover, or sounds like we're all done. Meeting adjourned.
All right.